talks classic rock. Q1043.
Good morning. We are just weeks away from it's unbelievable to even wrap my head around this, the 20-year commemoration of 9/11. And joining me this morning, Vinny Variale is the president of the EMS Officers Union Local 3621. And we're going to do this in two segments. After 7:15, we're going to talk about what the EMS is currently facing, what's going on with contract negotiations, what's going on with COVID, with the vaccinations, all that. But first, I really wanted to get your story, Vinny. You know, I've been active in the 9/11 community for 13 years, and I've come to realize that everyone has their own personal 9/11 story. And I thought coming up on the 20-year commemoration, this was a good time to start collecting these stories as a historic document so that they live on for future generations. So, Vinny, I'm going to ask you, I have no idea what you were doing on 9/11 20 years ago, but I would like you to tell our listeners, take us through your day, start to finish, Vinny, and thank you for joining us.
Sure, thank you. So that morning it was actually off, and I worked a second job, as many of EMS members have, second and third jobs, the night before. So I had just gotten home. Then I went to work my second job early in the morning because it was my day off from EMS. And while I was actually working for the Daily News at the time, and everybody there knew I worked for EMS, and people had said that a plane hit the building, hit the World Trade Center. At first, everybody just figured it was just an accident, something happened, a small plane might have hit, whatever. And we actually went to the back of the building to look and see what was going on. We saw the smoke and everything like that. Then we heard the second plane hit. And we all knew at that moment, it's like everybody, a light bulb went off in everybody's head that this was no accident, that we're under attack. I immediately told my foreman I had to leave. They understood because I was an emergency responder. I left. I went home to get my gear, and going into work, I remember they were shutting down the tunnel, they were shutting down the highways, but first responders, it was almost like a convoy of first responders going down to the highway to report to their stations and so forth. I reported to my station at the time, was in Staten Island, and there was had to be at least 30 or 40 of us got onto a bus. They took us down into Manhattan by the Brooklyn Bridge. At that time, they then separated us in groups. It was really people were responding and doing their job. At the same time, it was kind of chaotic. I think everybody was still in shock of what we were seeing and what was going on. Everybody's mind, New York City was under attack, and we didn't know what else was going to happen at the time. You know, now we know there's two planes in New York City, but you know, anything could have happened after that. Bombs could have started going off for all we knew. Nobody knew, and there were some members who were missing. We didn't know where they were. So it was very. Between the dust still floating around and the atmosphere, the fire still going on, and people running around everywhere trying to help as many people that were walking off the bridge, it was a completely chaotic scene. We then split us up into groups, started marching over the bridge to try to help as many people as possible that needed medical attention. And I think, you know, it was hard to say at the time where exactly I was because everything was covered in the soot and the dust and the debris, and you really couldn't tell what blocks of work or what. I think I was around Vesey Street at the time when I made it into Manhattan, near the World Trade Center, and usually a lot of water and saline we'd be using to wipe people's faces, and then if they had any injuries, bandages, stuff like that, we were using. But the scene to me, I mean, it reminded me of scenes I've seen on TV, like in Beirut when they blew out buildings, and it was like a war zone, literally like a war zone. Parts of cars and planes and stuff, and it was just crazy. I've never seen anything like that in my life, and I've said many times before, a lot of stuff I've seen I probably don't want to see anymore. I wish I could forget it. Certainly not the people who died that day. I honor them, and but a lot of scenes that just, in EMS, you deal with horrific incidences every day. That was definitely the most horrific incident I've ever seen, and never expected to see something like that in my lifetime. But mostly that was my day. I stayed down there for 4 days. We went through the rubble. We started teams sifting through the rubble looking for survivors. After that, they started hauling stuff. I believe they were making arrangements to haul whatever they were taking out of the rubble to different sides of the city, and then eventually Staten Island landfill got a lot of it to sift through it for personal belongings and stuff. And then we were sent a week later to Staten Island. I was part of that crew that stood by in case the FBI agents, the police officers, investigators got injured, because some of that stuff was very sharp and it was very intoxicating, and so they may need medical attention. So we were transferred to the landfill at that time. And for the next, I think it was almost 2 years, many of our members were either sent down there, assigned down there to work steady, or were working down there on overtime. And during that time in November 2001, I was promoted to lieutenant. And the station I served was the station that was one of the main stations that served the World Trade Center. It was Station 3-1 by the Brooklyn Bridge in Brooklyn. And we would send units there every day. And we would go down there every day to check on the members, make sure they're okay, if they need anything logistically and health-wise. And it was I think it was all so strange, because it almost felt like it wasn't real, like this wasn't really happening for a while. And then when it all really hit you, we were all amazed by this, that we got to see this, and that New York City was actually in a war. So basically that was my day. I mean, there are probably details I'm leaving out after so many years. Like I said, I try, while I will never forget the people who served, I really don't want to remember some of the things, the horrific scenes, body parts that we had to label and bring in, and stuff like that. These are things after a while you just can't take and want to deal with anymore.
Vinny, so you were working at the landfill part of the time on Staten Island, which was actually one of the most toxic areas, other than being on the pile at Ground Zero itself, because all of that dust from the building being pulverized was taken there to search for body parts to identify. And by the way, 40% of the victims have never been identified. But I want to ask you, how is your health? Do you suffer any health effects from being exposed at Ground Zero and Staten Island?
In the beginning, I had some respiratory illness for a couple of months after I responded down there. I forget, but I was given some medications to help me breathe a little better. But since then, thank God, I've not had any health problems. Unfortunately, many of our members since then have died from illnesses they received responding to 9/11. So they weren't as lucky as I am. I hope. I mean, you look, the other thing is you don't know what's going to happen in the future. And that's really, that thought you want to cherish every day you have, because you never know when that day is going to come that maybe I'm going to get the cancer or get whatever ailment or illness that could be the end of me in the future, in years to come, and that's something we all have to deal with. All of us who responded that day have to deal with.
I assume you're registered with the World Trade Center Health Program and getting your monitoring every 6 months.
Absolutely, yes. Well, I get monitored every year for my annual medical in the fire department.
Let me ask you also, I'm speaking with Vinny Variale, and he is the president of the EMS Officers Union Local 3621. We're talking right now about his response on 9/11. I mean, you mentioned the horrific scene, which if those of us who are not directly there cannot even begin to comprehend. Do you suffer from any PTSD as a result?
I think all members in EMS suffer from some sort of PTSD at different levels. 9/11 definitely enhanced my PTSD. I think I manage it well, but I do realize after all these years of working in EMS, this 27 years, you know, working in this job, you have to be able to emotionally turn that switch off that makes you not overreact or panic in situations where you needed to provide assistance. Because if you lose your cool and you don't have your mindset, you're not going to be able to help anybody. And I think after doing that and dealing with horrific situations over the years, it has a real effect on your mind and your emotion. I want to say it's like a burnout feeling, but it's not really. It's worse than that. It's a feeling of losing a piece of your humanity, what makes you a human being, the feeling and so forth. And I never used to cry at funerals anymore. People would die, and I would stand there. And then now later on in life, I feel like I want to, and I, you know, it's a mixed emotional feeling. It's very painful. A lot of times people, ordinary citizens, if they heard EMS members talk jokingly or whatever, they might think we're crazy because it's a little dark humor we use and stuff like that. But it's because of what we deal with on a regular basis, and it's kind of our way to blow off steam, so to speak, and you know, try to normalize the job we have. And 9/11 certainly would you know, exacerbate that whole feeling of PTSD and trying to blow up that steam for the horrific scenes that you've seen that day.
I was told that at least one EMS'er who responded on 9/11 killed himself. I had heard as well during COVID, we lost, I think, more than one FDNY EMS'er to suicide. Given what you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, do you think that there should be mental health programs set up ongoing for those who work for the EMS?
Absolutely. EMS, for 9/11 reasons and for everyday reasons of the jobs we deal with, EMS should have a mental health program. To this day, even after the pandemic, we still do not. The fire department's current answer was to implement a peer support team. And I don't think that's enough. I don't think that qualifies as real support. People are going to talk to one another if they feel comfortable with you and they trust you. Real mental health program would involve real professionals who are trained in how to deal with PTSD and how to identify it, knowing that, and I said this before, I think everybody in EMS with the years they have on suffer from PTSD. It just varies in the levels of how bad they're handling it. Obviously, the extreme is unfortunately those who take their own life and commit suicide because they can't handle it anymore. Which during COVID, we had 4 suicides from members, young members. One was an officer because they couldn't deal with the horrific scenes. They would constant death over and over and over and over again. I definitely believe EMS should have a real professional mental health program, and it should be confidential as well, because I think that's another big problem. First, we're first responders. We're the help. We're not supposed to need the help. That's what's in your, your ego, I guess you could call it, or your motto, or whatever you want to call it. But we do need the help, and it's very hard to get first responders to ask for that help. They don't want the stigma of saying, I need mental health. It makes it look like you're mentally weak or something like that, which is wrong. We're human beings, and no human being can take the constant horrific scenes and death over and over and over again. It'll dehumanize you in a way.
I'm here with Vinny Variale, president of EMS Officers Union Local 3621. Okay, we're in a situation. We didn't think we would be here again with COVID, but the Delta variant is on the rise. And here we have the city saying, all right, city workers, that includes the EMS, the FDNY as a whole, NYPD, have to be vaccinated or get weekly COVID tests. What is your reaction to that?
So I do have a problem. I do understand both sides of this argument. I do have a problem with anybody being forced to put something in their body they may not be comfortable with. I understand their personal right. But at the same time, I understand the city's position, and they have to, we are health professionals, and we have to provide medical care to the public. God forbid I have COVID, I'm asymptomatic, and I'm helping provide medical treatment, and I give COVID to, say, a person who has immune deficiency. Now I get them sick. That could be their death sentence by getting them sick. So there is a problem. I do see the other side of it. I do encourage everybody to get vaccinated. I was hesitant at first, but then I did come around and do it because I really want to get out of this pandemic. I think we need to defeat this COVID and get this over with and go back to a normal life. But again, I do understand the people's rights. So we already seen this challenged in the courts, and the courts have ruled that employers have the right to force employees to be vaccinated. So I get it. I think that the city should sit down with the unions and negotiate a process and a plan, and answer many questions that we have going forward on how this is going to be done. For example, if you're going to force us to be vaccinated, will the city take responsibility if we get sick from the vaccination, whether it be a day, because some people in the second shot, I got sick on the second shot, I only needed a day, but still, some people get sick, or maybe they get sick for a week or two, I don't know. Also, there are many other questions. How are they exactly going to do this? Is it going to be done on my time, their time? Where's the testing going to be done at every station throughout the city? Again, am I going to have to go on my day off? Am I going to go on my day working? And there's many other questions. I know I'm leaving some out, but this is the reason why we need to sit down with the city. They can't just implement this nilly-willy and throw this out there and say, hey, it's on you now. We have to negotiate a process that will work, and just ramming it down our throats like that is not going to help, because people may tend to push back and say, hey, I'm not doing this, now what? We want to get, the goal here is to get people vaccinated, they want to get vaccinated, or to get a process where they're not going to get anybody else sick. That's the bottom line.
Well, are you in talks with the city?
We're in talks contract-wise. I believe, I know DC 37, our executive director, Henry Garrido, he's having talks and conversations with the city about this.
What's going on with contract negotiations? Yeah, by the way, you can check out the video of this conversation on YouTube and on our website, q1043.com. So Vinny is sitting in front of a banner which says FDNY EMS pay parity now. Explain.
Yes, so we have been without a contract for over 3 years now. And when you opened up, you talked about now we have this new variant coming here. Things may be going back to wearing masks and so forth. I hope it doesn't get worse like it did and go back to the way it was. But again, you're dealing with a workforce where nobody was prepared. FDNY was not prepared for this pandemic at all. The city wasn't prepared for this. Even though we'd had conversations, I personally sat in conversations almost 10 years ago with the fire department and the city of New York about the possibility of a pandemic. They were worried about the influenza, the pig virus, the one with the I can't get the word out right now.
Swine flu?
That's it. The swine flu, right? They were worried. They thought that was going to be the big COVID pandemic that was going to come. We had multiple meetings on that. They talked about pandemic, what's going to happen, and how we need. And we knew then we didn't have enough masks. We didn't have places for our members to quarantine.
When was that, Vinny? When was that?
That was almost 10 years ago.
Wow.
It was almost 10 years ago. We talked about this. And we pointed these things out, that we didn't have enough masks. We didn't have enough staffing because we were understaffed. We're still understaffed for EMS back then and now. We talked about that. We talked about places for quarantine. They actually had a good answer at the time. They said they were going to use places in Fort Taunton that they could have our members quarantine at, which I thought was a good answer. And they would have to increase the levels of masks they have and gloves and gowns so that we can isolate. But nobody did anything. And when the pandemic came, they didn't have members quarantined anywhere. Our members were sleeping in cars. They had COVID. They wouldn't go home. I remember we did on your broadcast on I forgot what day it was. It was a Monday. It was a morning broadcast. We talked about how our members had COVID and they were sleeping in their cars because they didn't want to bring it home to their families. Where were these places for them to quarantine? It didn't exist at the time. The EMS Help, FDNY Help Fund started the process of putting these members in hotels, and then the fire department eventually, through the FDNY Foundation, followed through and started getting these hotel rooms for everybody. But I mean, where were the masks? We were short masks. They were rationing masks, telling us we can go in with towels wrapped around our faces or rags. I mean, it was ridiculous, you know. And there's a workforce that's not only understaffed and dealing with shortages and resources, but pay and benefits. Our sick leave is 12 days a year. You, after 12 days, when you run out of sick time, you're off payroll. And the worst part about being, yes. And the worst part about being off payroll is not only that you lose your pay, you lose your medical benefits. So think about that a minute. If I'm sick, I lose my pay. Now I lose my medical benefits, which I need to get better. So the city then, again, off the cuff, they said, okay, all COVID illnesses will be covered with excused leave time. We should have had unlimited sick leave, just like police, fire, sanitation already have. Why doesn't EMS have these things? We earn $40,000 less a year than police, fire, and sanitation. Why? Why is EMS being treated in such a way? And this is, and the reason why I bring this up is because we were relied upon. We were the tip of the proverbial spear to walk in there in COVID, during COVID, into houses where people were dying, to help bring people back to life, put our lives in jeopardy, bringing people to the hospital, trying to save them, restart their heart literally at home. We went from 80 cardiac arrests a day on a normal day to 350 a day. And we lost 12 of our own members from either COVID or suicide because of the pandemic in 1 year. And still, till this day, we never received hazard pay. We never received any, we still don't have a contract. Our staffing is still low. You know, and even in contract negotiations, I won't get into too much details because we're in the middle of it, they still will not acknowledge or recognize EMS as a uniformed emergency service. They still talk to us as if we're office personnel. I don't know how you can consider EMS office personnel. Emergency is in the title. I mean, you know, I don't work in well, I work in an office, but EMTs and paramedics, lieutenants and captains are working in the field. They're working shoulder to shoulder with firefighters and police officers. You know, we go to shootings and fires and so on. We respond to pandemics. How could we be considered an office personnel? Not to put them down, but it's a totally different job. So now we're still trying to bargain, and I hope we have a contract soon. Something that we should deserve parity. We should get parity. We deserve parity with police.
You're asking for, so what would the pay be if you got parity?
Well, we want parity in both pay and benefits. So we want something similar. I mean, look, it's not the exact number, but something similar to they have unlimited sick leave. We should have the same unlimited sick leave policy. They make starting the top salary for a firefighter, excuse me, is $85,000 a year. An EMT should be making that same, something to that effect, or at least close to it. Right now, top paid EMT after 5 years is $50,000 a year. Top paid firefighter is $85,000 a year. Sanitation, after 5 years, they're making $80,000 a year. The man coming to pick up your trash is earning $30,000 more than the EMT coming to save your life. How is that right?
Why does anyone join the FDNY EMS?
Good question. EMS, what started the erosion of EMS was the backdoor promotion to firefighter. When they opened, Giuliani started that, it opened up the doors for now all these firefighters and chief sons to come into EMS, work there they actually call it doing time. They come into EMS for a few years and then they take the promotion to fire. And that's how they get into fire. Why is it a back door? Because if you go take the open competitive exam and score 100, the person who went to EMS and scores a 70 will get hired before you scoring 100.
And that's still the case.
That's still the case today. And it's killing EMS because right now, 75% of our service in EMS has less than 5 years on the job. 68% has less than 3 years on the job. So we don't have experience like we used to in EMS anymore. And studies have shown, numerous studies have shown that the survival rate and improved patient outcomes happen when you have EMTs and paramedics with at least 7 years or more experience on the job. That means if I just told you the number, 75% of the workforce has less than 5 years, What does that tell you about the survival rate in New York City and the patient outcomes? New York City is literally killing New Yorkers. This administration and the fire department, by not allowing people to make a career in EMS, is killing New Yorkers by not having the people experience that they need here.
Is it good or bad for the EMS to be part of the FDNY?
I always said that I didn't care if I was part of the FDNY or Department of Sanitation, as long as we're given the proper resources, treated appropriately and equally as everybody else. But I'm starting to see more and more that I think we should be a separate third agency. I think if you have an EMS on its own, they can be focused in emergency medicine rather than just fire. I think fire is focused in different areas: fire prevention, fighting fires, emergency medicine, and a whole bunch of other things. I can go down a list. I think each agency needs to be focused on what's important and their main mission, especially when you're dealing with life-saving issues. I do know there was a former Chief McFarland, who passed away. He was dedicated to EMS for many years, and he really wanted to do the right thing at that point. And he used to talk about the fact that we should be more attentive to the possibility of what to do in a pandemic. And this was always thrown on the back burner. Why? Because we're in the fire department. And the fire department, fires and fire prevention is number one. And EMS is usually taken as a back burner or second step. We'll talk about it later kind of deal. Meanwhile, out of the 1.7 million calls done each year, 1.5 million calls are EMS in the fire department. So you tell me where the priority should be looked at. Both are very important, by the way. Firefighting, obviously, we have to be concerned with that, but so is EMS. And I think that the FDNY has failed in providing an atmosphere or environment that is fair, equal to EMS, and nurturing it to have people with experience stay here so we can focus on the mission of emergency medicine.
Vinny, tell me about the EMS FDNY Help Fund.
Yeah, thank you for that. EMSFDNYHelpFund.com, that's our website. It was created a year after we lost with the passing of EMT Adira Arroyo. She was killed by an emotionally disturbed person from our ambulance. During that time, there were people who wanted to help the family. She was a single mother of 5 children, 16-year veteran. With overtime, she earns a little over $60,000 for the year, which, again, how do you live on that? So many people wanted to donate money, but the union really didn't have an avenue to collect money and then hand it out. We're not a 501c organization. So I came up with an idea of creating the EMS FDNY Help Fund so that people who wanted, and organizations who wanted to donate and help our EMTs and paramedics could do so. And that, to this date, it worked out great, but both unions support it, both Local 2507 and 3621, and the Superior Officers Association all support this fund. That people donate money into the fund, and we have helped thousands of close to 1,000 EMTs and paramedics. During COVID, I have to say many organizations stepped up. We did so many things. We put people in hotels. Verizon donated over $750,000 to help make sure everybody was fed 3 times a day, because a lot of people don't know this. We were working 16, 20-hour shifts. Nobody could go shopping for food when they got home or eat. So we're grateful for the donations we received, that we were able to get the food for everybody. We used to deliver it to every single station, morning, afternoon, and night. Everybody got food, so they were well fed, and they could take food home to their family too.
Again, how does somebody make a donation to the EMS FDNY Help Fund?
Just go to www.emsfdnyhelpfund.com, and you can pick the donation area of it, and we appreciate anything you can donate.
Thank you so much, Vinny Variale, President, EMS Officers Union Local 3621. If you missed any part of this conversation, It lives on the iHeart Radio app, which you can download for free. And all of these interviews are under Sunstein Sessions. You may also want to check out my podcast and YouTube video, 9/11 Stories, as we get closer to the 20-year commemoration. And I'll see you guys tomorrow morning on the Jim Kerr Rock and Roll Morning Show, Q104.3.
New York's classic rock, Q1043.